Corruption is an adaptive challenge in Nigeria. It's not just systemic, it is cultural. This is who we are, and we've accepted. Nigeria is both complex and complicated. So, therefore, Nigeria is complicated within the context of the demographics of this Nigeria, of where we are now. Presently, it doesn't make sense. You have the geriatrics ruling
No, it's brilliant
Yes,
to have
Dabib,
you
how
on
are you?
today. I'm great.
Thank you.
I'm great. I'm great. It's absolutely fantastic. Professor taught in the United States. There's a lot of brain behind, this thing. And this
That's
is
because I have
making
a
it.
big head.
Well, I don't know about that, sir. So I also know that you're a music lover. So I'll start with a song that I suspect that you love, which is "Oh
Yes.
Pirates, yes, the robber
Yes,
sold I to the
I do the
merchant ship."
match.
Yeah. So what's
Yeah,
what's the
it's
background
all
of
right.
the music? Why do you actually like that particular track?
Well, the thing about it is that you have to understand um, what I might describe as the message behind the music, right? Bob Marley was a sage in a way in which he managed to crystallize the struggle of post-colonial Jamaica, post-colonial Africa, and phrase it in a way in which people understood it. Reggae became the instrumentality. Put it this way, reggae was the medium. What was more important was the message. The other person that I loved, still do, with love, respect, and reverence was Abba Mega.
Oh yeah, fella.
I often joke that if my life was a movie, Fela's music would be the soundtrack, the
Oh
backdrop
wow.
music to my life. Yes, those were
So
incredible men.
they partly shaped your philosophy and all that.
Yeah, to the extent when you're young and you're listening to this music, I always listen in everything I do to the message. What is the subliminal message in all of it? So I never take anything at face value. It's almost like if you're familiar with space, search for extraterrestrial life, there's always that static, right? Okay?
Yeah.
There's always static when they're trying to figure out if there's anything out there. So you have to train your ears to listen for the signal in the static. There's always a signal in the chaos all around. There's always a message. There's always something there, right? So you have to be train your ears in every instance to listen to the signal, right? There's always
hmm
a message. So that is my default position. So when I listen to music, some is for pure entertainment, others like Bob Marley, Fela is for the message, and it resonates then and now.
Now you are far ahead of your time. Looking at your bio, your profile, and all that. You lectured in new media. New media seems to be the way that things are taking shape now when it comes to information dissemination.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what led you into new media?
Okay, I was a research fellow at a place called the Freedom Forum Media Studies Center, and this must have been, oof, I'm dating myself now. This easily over, yeah, about 32 years ago, at the very onset of information technology. In those days, they used to talk about the information superhighway.
Yeah.
So we were one of the early adapters then. We had, a phone link and a router. I don't know, this was before your time. You had to dial up. I go, "Beep," then it comes online. So what I used to do when I was at Columbia was I would dial through the Columbia network and have
Yeah.
access to the internet. It was not that much. It was at that time, I think it was or American Online that provided
Yeah.
conduit, a
AOL.
gateway into the. So after my program, my research then was on convergence, the press, democracy, and technology in Africa.
Okay.
I just knew over 30 years ago that there was something that was happening that was going to shape Africa and indeed the world. And that something was the internet, right? So while I was Colombia, I had the opportunity to talk to all the champions of industries, captains of industries. One of my favorite one was what's the name of this Swiss English guy, the guy that invented the World Wide Web. We used to have Wednesday seminars, and all the
Okay.
captains of industry and technology would come and sit down and talk with us. So after my year there, I was taken on as an adjunct professor and we're thinking in terms of new media and what that would be. At that time, there was active research going on to designing a device that journalists could use on the field. Because
Okay.
formerly, in my own time, was so analog. When as a journalist here in Nigeria, what typically happens, 30, 40 years ago, you write your story longhand and you type. Just 1 second, please. Just 1 second. So you type. You have your stories typed, and then it's fed into the machine and it's printed and all of that. When I was at Newsweek, then it was all automated. We had this screen with green text on it, running a program called Xyrite. So I was there transitioning to the automation of information technology. And so the idea was new media. What is really? Because at that time, print was still king,
Yeah.
newspapers were still newspaper. So in the very early stages of the advent of the internet, right? We were fortunate enough to be able to experiment with ideas, various social models, various communication models, and to teach graduate students about this incoming revolution that was about to sweep the entire world. But the thing I realized was on this information superhighway, as the internet was then called, right? I would look around and metaphorically in the back of my mind, I imagine that we're indeed on the super highway. I look around,
Yeah.
I didn't see any black people, you know, I didn't see any black people in most of the classes I attended. I was the only black person. And this is 32 years ago. So after that gig at Columbia, where I taught for 2 years, I went on to do some consultancy work for the UNDP, right?
Okay.
And we said I designed a program called the African Internet Project. We were going around various countries establishing African gateways, internet gateways, because I knew that it was going to revolutionize everything. And it was through that experience I suddenly realized that, wow, okay, we need to do something in Nigeria. So I raised some money, put some money of my own, and we started the West African NGO network, WangoNet, which was the first tech hub in sub-Saharan Africa. But that was 25, 26 years ago. So in terms of being ahead of my time, I've always been ahead of my time. Even as I speak to you now, I'm at least a decade ahead of what is happening around me. I don't know whether it's a strength or it's a weakness because as a strength, you're seeing the future,
Yeah.
you know. As a weakness, as a leader, as a weakness, the people around you don't see it. So it's always very frustrating. But one of the things I've learned about leadership is that you can't be too far ahead of the people you want to lead. Otherwise, you lose them over the
You lose
horizon.
touch. Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, it's a balance between bringing up younger people. But yes, the vision is still real. My understanding of it is still forward looking.
Richness of your experience. And I
Mm,
mean, not when I say experience, I don't mean necessarily the educational experience, but the
mm,
experience of the transformation itself, of new media
yes.
taking shape and the
Mm,
potentials that, it could possibly, give to people, especially on the African continent. It must have been a
mm.
bit worrisome for you at that point in time, looking at the lack of infrastructure across the board.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting you say lack of infrastructure because you go in there thinking that, again, you have to imagine me coming back from the States 25 years ago with a westernized mindset. I didn't have to deal with infrastructural problems, right? You come into Nigeria and you want to set up this visionary space. And then the next thing you realize that, wow, okay, they don't have internet readily available. So you have to provide internet. And the next part was, oh my goodness, power. They don't have power. So you have to provide power. We're using inverters 20, 25 years ago. And then, by the way, haven't done all of that. There's no content. So I go back to the time when it was still the information superhighway.
Yeah.
And I realized that we didn't see any black people on that highway. So the idea was to create a non-for-profit that will provide the three things that I talked about: access to the internet,
Yeah.
right? Content to the internet, and training, because that was the first thing. Okay, so
Yeah.
you have covered all the infrastructural challenges. Okay, now they have the systems in place, but they're not trained. So that was those were the early challenges. And I think I have written about it in some journals. But the key thing about it is also the rapid uh, um, absorption of technology. I was there when the GMS revolution kicked in. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, my phone number is about 26 years old. The same number I've had for 26 years. I haven't changed it.
I still have a number like that as well myself.
Yes. So I haven't changed it. But what struck me were two things. In every technology, there's how you first adopt it. And
Yeah.
Africa was an early adopter of that technology because of the demographics, the very young demographics. The second
Yeah.
part of it is how do you adapt it to use? So we have a very high adoption and adaptation rate in Africa. It's gone beyond what anybody could have imagined 20, 25 years ago. And it's driven mostly by young people.
I mean
And
the level of ingenuity that we have seen when it
yes,
comes to to using technology all over
mhm.
Africa. It's a shocker to a lot of people, even in the
Yeah,
West
no,
as
it
well.
defies the odds. Yeah, it defies the
It,
odds.
it, they've always looked at Africans as being less educated, less
Yeah.
privileged in a lot of ways. So finding out that Africans can actually use what they developed and then take a step ahead of them in some certain areas was a bit of a shocker to them. The level of content creation in Africa right now is on the table.
Oh, without question.
Democratize, democratization, in terms of film distribution, in terms of, comedy, what we call
Hmm.
skits,
Hmm.
basically, it's just like this, whereby people get to exchange ideas, are able to talk outside of that box that people seem to
Yes.
have been kept in when it comes to issues like, police. I won't talk about the police just yet. Press freedom. I'll say that first because there is a very deep relationship between press freedom and the police itself. I'll come to
Yes.
that a bit
Without
later.
question.
Oh yeah, I'll
Okay.
come back to that a bit later. Now, did you transform from new media into being the chief executive of the police reform transformational? How did that go?
Okay. Well, that is it's not like most things in Nigeria. It's not like most things in the world. It wasn't a direct linear or lateral movement of trying to set up police sector reforms. I'll give you the background to that. But before I go to the police reforms proper, you said something about just the high adoption rates of
Yeah,
technology on the continent, and it's driven by young people who are more or less digital natives. They were
yeah,
born into it.
they were
This
born
is
into
their
it.
country. Yes. Some of us are vicariously sometimes digital natives, sometimes digital nomads. We kind of just go through that terrain and move on to something else. So there's an intergenerational, there's a definitely a generational gap in terms of the old analog way of doing things, right? And I just want to make a political point here about how democratization, which you mentioned, and what
Yes,
technology is doing in terms of reducing the barriers to access in a way in which is unprecedented, right? And forming a tight global mesh of networks, right? That is constantly being iterated. So ideas are now pretty acceptable, right? And freely available, right?
yeah,
As an old time print journalist, right? My concern then and now was that we didn't have any editorial filters, which is a good thing, right? But the thing about it is that the conversations are not moderated or
yeah,
modulated in a way which it makes for sense. It also hampers there's a lot of creativity to be sure, but there's a lack of critical thinking and problem solving, right? Skip makers, yes, great. Everything is built on somebody else's platform. Yeah, there's a tiny sliver of people who are actually doing some very interesting work in that regard. But one of the things I always do is that I always try and get the feeling for Nigeria, the zeitgeist, if you will, by going to my Twitter, I think we'll call it Twitter, X handle, and looking at what is trending in Nigeria. And some of it is just amazing to me, right?
yeah.
I look at the way young people, their minds are fixated on things that absolutely no value to their lives. None, right? And you can see the escapism and, always the rank ignorance, right? You're using a tool that you think is free and that it gives you a platform to express your ignorance. I think it's okay. Meanwhile, you're confronted with existential crises, your own welfare, the future that you're part of. You can't seem to get any interesting, there are small pockets of reason, right? And thought, but in the main, it's just inane, mundane bants, as you guys call it. There's no
They
value
call it
add.
the young ones call it cruise. That's what they call
They
it.
call it what things,
They
right?
call it cruise, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
So I have to change my
yeah,
lexicon then. Tools,
your
yes.
yeah, you have to change your lingo there. For me, I
Yes,
look at
it's true.
I see it as a massive disconnect. Yes,
Mm.
you're right by calling it escapism. Now, I grew up during a time when patronage was the order of the day in Nigeria. Now,
It
the
still
gap
is.
between well, I mean, as of that time, I think the level of patronage was much higher. It
Mm.
was spread, a bit far and wide, as opposed to now that it's so now
Mm.
very few people are actually getting, the patronage. At that time, a lot of people my age, that is, were not really able to think. They were not able to come up with innovative ideas. There was generation passing over information and passing over leadership to the next generation was practically impossible.
Yep.
I've said this to so many of my friends, people that I know very well, who even on the future on pages of newspapers. And we've had some deep conversations, and I've said, but there's actually no substance. Can you tell me what exactly you say you do?
Mm.
Even if you want to narrow it down, and you can't narrow it down
Mm-hmm.
to one, narrow it down to three things. It's almost impossible for them to narrow it down to even three
Yeah.
things.
Because there's no critical thinking. A lot part of it is the educational problems of
Sorry, yeah, yeah. So for a lot of us, it was a case of there were challenges even when you tried to be innovative intellectually.
yeah.
I had an incident when I was 20 years old, thereabouts, with a lecturer where you were expected to go to a library if you were doing assignments. So
Mm.
basically what that means is that if the books were 50 years old, you use the same books. Don't come up with any new
Yes.
ideas. Don't try to be fresh. Nobody wants to hear that. But I wasn't even thinking along those lines. So I had
Mm.
access to a computer. Those days it was the dial-up,
Mm-hmm.
you dial to get the internet connectivity and all that. So I just thought it was a very fast way of getting my assignment done. So I actually did that. And then I took it to the man and he looked at it and was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Where did you get this from? And I told him, latest research, blah, 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 blah. Half the guy looked at that and said, my friend, go to the library. So he was not even interested in the fact that it was new research.
Yeah, but the thing about it, again, Habib, I'll tell you a slightly different story about my time in university. I went to University of Lagos and I studied philosophy and English. English was supposed to be my minor of sorts. I had a lecturer, Professor Biodun Adetibo, and he was one of those freshly minted graduates this is a long time ago
Oh, I know.
now, from the US. And I remember when we were doing linguistics, something about transformational generative grammar. And there's this phenomenal mind, encased in the head of a guy called Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is perhaps one of the most influential global public intellectuals. Really smart guy. He was at Columbia, and when I was there, my time, I had the privilege of listening to two or three of his lectures. Very, very bright person. And so I read up on Chomsky. He was talking about transformational generative grammar, which was the basis for language. And I read up on something else that Chomsky had written. And so I decided to introduce it into the class, right? I've always been very forward. I've always I still remain intellectually curious about anything. And I used to read. I don't read as much as I used to now, but I read a lot. Things that have absolutely no bearing with my own reality, I'll read. So the typical student lecturer interaction then was, any questions?
Yeah. Nobody
Yeah,
would get.
nobody get no. But I would always ask a question, and so the guy would look at me, and I remember one time I'd actually written about, I'd read something about Chomsky. It had nothing to do with linguistics. It had something to do with social theory or something. So I kind of just slipped it into the conversation, as they say, to catch clues, right? That
Yeah.
language still works.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they say, to catch some clues with the guy. The guy looked at me and said, Mr. Lardner, Professor Chomsky, yes. But deep is that I went in about 2 or 3 layers deep into my own argument. And now
Yeah.
I'm saying, what we're talking about now is this aspect of linguistics and his own theory of this, that, and the other, that. Now, so each time I was not in class, he would look for me. I mean, before, if you're writing the stuff and say, okay, does anybody have any questions? No question. Does Mr. Lardner have any questions? But fast forward, Columbia, J school, I was teaching there. I just went to the J school was the Department of English, right?
Yeah.
So one day I wandered into the Department of English and I was looking, and there was Adetubo's name, Magnum cum laude, was there. The professor that was my
Yeah.
professor was a stellar. He won the Dean's Prize in his time at Columbia University.
Colombia.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, if a shift from my own time when I was in school and your own time, interregnum, the perhaps 15 to 20 years, we lost something. And that thing has been compounded in 2 generations now. So you have a whole bunch of young people who lack the critical thinking skills because they've never been challenged to think critically about problem solving,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But they also have access to the internet. So you understand what I'm saying? So it's a paradox. You have all this information, right? But they don't know how to transform the information into knowledge, because that
Oh yeah.
transformational process is critical thinking, and that's what they lack. So they'll paraphrase something without fully understanding the underlying meaning of whatever it is. And I give public talks, and I'll share this with you. My 3 favorite quotes. Occasionally, I give lectures, and lectures are anchored on quotes, right? So it might be
Okay.
lecture on 3 quotes, or 4 quotes, or 5 quotes. I give 3 or 4 quotes, and then unpack it and situate it within the context of whatever the topic is. So my 3 favorite quotes are this. The first one is very common, attributed to Einstein. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We do that all the time. Why do we keep doing the same thing over and over? Why do we keep re-electing the same tired, rapacious leaders? And we somehow think it's going to change. Why? Nobody has actually stopped to ask why. The second quote is by Einstein, and I paraphrase now. You can't solve a problem thinking at the level that caused that problem. We are constantly trying to solve problems, oftentimes thinking below the level that caused the problem. So you can't solve it.
Yeah.
You pair it with the first
Definitely.
quote, it means that we keep doing the same thing over and over, right? Okay. Then the third one is quote by a guy called Mr. Fuller, an American architect actually, and it's my best favorite quote on change, the nature and substance of change. Again, I'm paraphrasing. You don't change something by attacking the status quo of it. You change something by creating a new paradigm that renders the old one obsolete.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree.
So that's what we've been doing. You want to change, but you keep harping and complaining and harping about the system as it is. You have to redesign it. But you cannot redesign it if you keep doing the same thing over and over.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a,
So
I'm,
you cannot.
I, I have a I have a direct experience of what you just said because
Mhm.
I've always had something to say about the way things are in Nigeria.
Mhm.
Born in Nigeria, I lived in Nigeria till I was 40 years old before I left Nigeria.
Until you're
Until I was 40 years old.
40 years old. How old are you?
Until I was 40. Well, you could add 11 to that. So
Oh my goodness, that old man.
I don't know about that, but anyways, now, about 20 years ago, I think when Facebook and all that first came out, I started
Mhm.
understanding what the power of being able to actually voice your opinion. I set up a Facebook group called For a Better Nigerian Police.
For better Nigerian police.
For a Better Nigerian Police. Now, it
Oh
was supposed
wow.
to be it was supposed to be a platform where interactions with the police, positive or
Mm.
negative, we should put it on there so that other people can learn from what was actually happening in real time,
Mm.
because that's what that opportunity provided. You could see a lot of posts and all whatnot. I used to be pretty popular at that time.
Mm.
I don't know about now, but really popular at that time on Facebook. So I had a lot of followers, a lot of people that signed up to that for a Nigeria. Yeah, for a better Nigeria. After a while, somebody told me, you know what, you have to take this thing down. I said, why? He said, for your personal sake. I said, I don't understand. He said, you know the way things are in this country, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, he calls me and she says, Habib, this your police, whatever, and all whatnot,
Mm.
all this you're trying to
Your rant.
be an advocate for better this thing and all whatnot. Nigeria is not like that. I beg you in the name of God. This your police. Shut it down. I was like, why should I shut it? I used to be very strongly opinionated. I was like, why should I shut it down? I'm not shutting it. Nothing is going to happen. I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just giving people the opportunity to say what
Yep.
their interactions are. So she calls my mom. Says,
Oh.
Mom, now
Yep.
you know how we are cultured.
Mm-hmm.
Family has a lot of influence, especially when it comes to
Talk
parents.
to me about it.
So my parents, shaped me as much as they could into what they wanted me to be, but unfortunately that didn't work in the
I feel
initial.
you, bro.
But now, things have really changed. I've become much more academic in my outlet. So calls me and she's like, your sister told me X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. Of course, my mom didn't know how to use Facebook at the time. She didn't even know what it
Mm.
was. So she told me, blah, 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 you're risky your life. You need to take this thing down. So I said, okay, I'm not going to take it down, but I'm not going to post on it anymore. If people still want to post on it, they can go ahead and post on it.
Yeah, provide the platform.
I just left it there. And it's still there till now. I don't get any notifications from it anymore and all that because, of course, when you have found out something and you're not actively
Mm.
participating anymore, Jesus.
Mm.
But the point I was trying to make is, as of that time, I realized that it was a platform and I started trying to utilize it. Years later, which is 4 years ago, I woke up one day, sat down, and I said to myself, we can't keep doing things the same way over and over and over again in life. Now, what type of information are people getting? Are people able to gain access
Mm.
to some certain people who are policymakers, who are elected officials, who are selected officials, to actually ask them questions? So I decided to set up an online radio station. Now, I've been lucky. I've been able to talk to a few people who have done quite a few things in Nigeria. I've never been shy asking them the really hard questions. And the funny thing is, they are willing to answer. But the
Mm.
mainstream media doesn't ask those questions.
Well, of course.
And if they're not asking those questions, then the people who want change can't see any hope for that change. So I don't entirely blame them. But at the same time, they have access to, I was telling somebody about a week ago, powerful tool in the world for the youth today is a mobile phone.
Mm.
Because everything you want to learn you can just
It's
access it
there,
from
yeah.
there. If you want to build a rocket and go to Mars, just watch YouTube. Everything is on
Yes.
there. Now, a lot of Nigerian youth do not realize that there are tons and tons and tons of free courses available online that they actually take that will make them marketable globally. Mobile phones. Rather than doing research, what they actually do is, like you rightly said, sir, They just engage in idle banter. From a platform earlier this year, it's also an education platform. It's absolutely free. People can do courses. We have about 50 courses on it. Well,
wonderful.
we purchased about 1,700 additional courses. So over time, through iterations, they're going to upload all those courses. Those courses are meant to be free for the African youth. Will not be used. The African. Go on there, learn anything you want to learn, collect your certificate. You don't need to pay it back. Get something. Let's first start from those trainings, the education, because without the education, speak all the English you want to speak. Nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
A lot of these young people have the capability to actually come marketing, but they lack the capacity. So how do we move from that capability to the capacity?
Okay. Let me give you a framing that I've oftentimes used. I've used this now for the last 15 years. Nigeria's problems and challenges are not technical. They are adaptive. I urge you to Google technical solutions versus adaptive challenges.
Okay.
There's a whole body of knowledge about it. Technical solutions versus adaptive challenges.
Okay. Gotten that.
Okay. So typically what happens that we offer technical solutions that are easy. There's a technical problem. We address it. This thing has to be changed. This thing has to be fixed. This platform has to be fixed. But the soft side of our challenge is not technical, it's adaptive. It's the soft side of it. The mindset, right? The understanding of your own ecosystem, the willingness to change. So in a lot of ways, our problem is not technology. It is psychology. You understand? And that is the most difficult part in any transformational agenda. How do you change the mindset? How do you get young people intellectually curious enough to want to A, learn, and B, learn about themselves and C, before looking about their future? Like you have this little gadget that we're speaking to. Now, wildest dreams 25 years ago, we did not imagine that the new media technology would be a cell phone. It wasn't on the cards at all.
Not at all.
It wasn't on the cards. And it's, and now we're talking about AI. We're talking about AGI. We're talking about all kinds of frontier busting technologies, right? That's totally going to reshape the way the world is over the next 10 years, right? Upend the value proposition, disrupt analog business models, right? Our youth would understand the end product of it, but they don't understand the underlying epistemology, the theory of knowledge behind it, because they're curious. I had the same kind of challenge you had. You had your Facebook page. I used to be an active journalist. I used to write stuff, opinions, under the military. And I can't tell you how many times I was arrested and harassed and detained.
Well, so definitely.
Sir?
Yeah,
these was I was. No, but even before I left to go to the States, when I left to go to the States, I left in what, 88 to go to Stanford. So that was a long time ago.
Really long.
My leaving at that time saved my life because I knew the fate understood that I could not have survived Abacha. I could not have survived Abacha. Babangida was okay, was still mean-spirited and all that. And I got to know all of these people firsthand. Babangida, I got to know. I'm very fortunate. Worked with General Obasanjo when I was running for Secretary General of the UN. Because I was in the UN for a while. I couldn't come back to Nigeria. I was persona non grata. But I digress. The challenge we have now is that we have all of these freedoms, more or less. You have this universal platform that is unhindered. You have this platform as basically a universal platform in which you can learn and express your views, right? We have internet. We have all kinds of other game-changing devices, processes, and yet, what are we doing with it? In our own time, when it was more analog, as a young man in my 20s, I used to walk around with a Go kit. Well, the Go kit was a small bag that had toothpaste, toothbrush, a little bit of cash, fresh underwear, right? Okay? Because you could be arrested at any time, and you were.
Wow.
Yes.
That's the stuff of spy movies and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, as a young person, and then, I can give you, snippets of encounters with the security people, with the Directorate of Military Intelligence in Apapa there, and all kinds of crazy. As a young person, I was idealistic. I didn't know, of course, there was danger, right? But you didn't
Yes.
think about it. It was Nigeria, and I could say and write about anything I wanted, right? There was no, but there was a price to pay. It's like your case now. After a while, the family got around and said, "Why are we complaining about Nigeria? What is your problem?" Of course, I didn't listen to anybody,
They'll be like you're
right?
stressing them.
Yeah, after a while, they just said, "Well, we just pray for you." At the time I went to the States, the time I got my letter of admission and all that, my passport was being processed by the American embassy for a
Wow.
visa. I was being detained. I think it was 16A Awolowo Road in Ikoyi. It's now a security office. We used to call it State House Extension because
Yeah.
there's a gate that leads from that place to Durham Barracks, which was the seat of power in those days. And I was joking with my interrogator that, okay, you want my passport? Okay, so why don't you guys take me tomorrow morning to the American embassy? So let me collect my passport. Like, since Lardner, you think we're very stupid, Abby? You go there and create a
Oh my
diplomatic
goodness.
incident.
And you're telling the truth.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the moment I go in there, the Rockos, and then of course, the International Committee for the Protection of Journalists, head of us. So this was before internet times, right?
Yeah,
So
way
yeah,
back.
imagine what would
Of
have
course.
happened if we had the power of the internet. What am I saying in all of this? I'm saying is that we have so much opportunity now to reshape our collective destiny, right? I was in Kigali about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were talking then about the African Renaissance against the backdrop of the African Free Trade Agreement, right? What are we doing with the technologies? As I speak to you now, I'm supposed to be writing a reference for one of my young mentees who wants to go and do an MBA at Stanford. I was at Stanford myself, right?
Also,
And
yeah.
my job and the things I do and I continue to is to encourage younger people to understand their lives and seize the day and be visionary and bold. You have all the intellectual resources. You have, but there's a willingness, the fear perhaps, and they all been anesthetized by music. All of those things are important too.
Yes, they
We
are.
did
Of
all of those
course, yeah.
things and we did more. In my younger days, I used to be a drummer. I used to be a musician. I used to drum.
Okay, so that's the
Yeah.
background in music. That's why you
Yeah. So,
great. Okay.
so there's a whole bunch of things that look at younger people and now. You guys have everything. If we had half the tools that are present now, my goodness, it's like what you said. Your lecturers then. Can you imagine in your own time and the succeeding generations? They'll go to the library. Meanwhile, the world has changed.
Well, that changed. It wasn't aware.
Yeah. So, okay, let me go back to the tracking of your question. How did I get into police sector reforms, right?
Yes. I mean, from the what do you call it? We used to call those broadcast vans
Yes.
to Black Maria.
Touche. Yeah. Yeah. I like that metaphor. Yeah, that's the transitionary phase. No, what happened was I'd always been writing about the police. There's an article I wrote, The Policeman Dilemma. I wrote that article 41 years ago, 42 years ago, as a young
Wow.
journalist.
Yeah.
Yes. And so every time I think about it, you know, I'm just amazed at, you know, the prescience of a young person who was clearly idealistic and all that. And nothing fundamentally has changed. It's like Nigeria. We're in suspended animation. Leaders over compounded incompetence of the leaders over the last 60 years means that we haven't grown at pace with our population. And that's something we always have to look at, right? The demographics. I'll come to that again because it's a key point to understanding how we move forward. So, I got my boss, mentor, big brother, professor. I'd worked with him at the UN as a consultant to the UN. I did a lot of work when he was um, permanent representative to the UN.
Yeah.
Okay, so the moment that he was appointed, it was clear that I had to work with him. Everybody who knew me, I didn't even know within. what, 12 hours of the appointment being made public. I started getting calls from the US, people who knew that I was very close to him because I've been working with him also on so many other policy issues. Anyhow, I decided I wasn't quite sure government, me, I just seemed like the most improbable person to work in government. Okay, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity created for me because I now have a view of both from the view from the outside in and the view more importantly from the inside out. So I have a much broad spectrum understanding of the challenges of Nigeria. So what happened was that during the NSAS thing, I was stuck in Abuja when NSAS was going. And I was just on the verge of making my mind, should I work with him? So I had access to the villa. Every day I would report there. I was staying in a hotel. There are some policy things. We're trying to get this office together. Okay, so I knew then that, this NSAS thing was serious. The government had no clue. As far as we
I
were
was in Abuja.
concerned,
Yeah, I was in Abuja at that time as well.
yeah,
But I saw
yeah, as
what
far
was
as we were
going on.
concerned, within the presence of the villa, it was regime change. That's what the securities were telling him. But it was much more than that. It was the harassment of a unit of the police, and young people had, enough of this, right? So the NSAS thing obviously blossomed into a lot of other things. Through the back door, because I work and I mentor young people, tech people, mostly, I had access to them. I kept telling them, and look, you guys had to find a back door to negotiate with government. Somebody has to step up so we can make your demands and compel government, right? So the 545 came up, right? After a while. And I warned them that the trajectory of this thing, that after 3, 4, 5 days, if you guys don't put a tap on this, one way or the other, it's going to just explode and metastasize into something else. Everybody will pile on to this thing. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Look at the way Lagos was burnt down. Criminal elements infiltrated the place. And that's so typical. So then I decided, wow, we have to do something with this police sector reform thing. Let's start with 545. I brought your idea then it was then and then I decided, okay, if I'm coming to work as a senior special assistant to Mr. President, I want to work on police sector reforms.
So it was
So
actually your choice.
Yes, it was my choice because after that NSAS thing, and then I've designed the program from scratch with assistance from some other good friends of mine, notably Dr. Charles Omole, who is a security expert. So he was now surprisingly working with the Speaker of the House then, right, as a security advisor. So it was just a wonderful, I don't know what it's coincidence or perhaps synchronicity. He and I were working together and we fashioned out this police sector reform thing, right? We managed to, through my own networks and contacts, we raised some money from the Germans because it was clear that typically nowhere in the world that there's a police reform itself. So we laid out a very comprehensive plan, that was structural. It wasn't just top, the working philosophy of Porto was the approaches would either be narrow, can be wide and shallow, or narrow and deep. Yeah, we knew they had to be both wide and shallow so that you have coverage and people know there's something happening, but narrow and deep so you're looking at the fundamental underpinnings for structural reforms, right? The other thing we used to say, out of my American experience, was that in the work we do, we measure twice and we cut once.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? In measuring twice, right?
Sure.
You measure the first measurement is the state of things as is.
Okay.
The second measurement is the future. So by design, everything has to be future proofed. So you just don't look at the plan the way it is. So you measure twice and you cut once. And we did some interesting work. We, to the extent in which was possible, it was then we now realized that everything in Nigeria is politics, right? Everything in Nigeria is politics, right?
Isn't that the same thing globally?
Yeah, globally, yes, but you have rule of law. You have strong institutions.
Institutions, yeah.
Yes, that provide guardrails, right? And, I've done a lot of work on corruption. One of my early other consultancy with the Nigerian government was the anti-corruption committee that was set up with the president, right? I was the strategy and communications advisor, right?
Okay.
And because I'd done a lot of work, Wangonet was famous for groundbreaking technological projects. One of them was the anti-corruption internet database, ACID. One of the very first project we did. Because I was looking at corruption. Why is it that there's no sense, there's just a sense of pervasive corruption? What is the opportunity cost to the rest of us in terms of development? Nobody. So I asked the hard questions, right? And I suddenly got to understand fully. Remember, I was talking about the view from the inside out, right? Why corruption is endemic in the Nigerian state. At one time, I used to imagine that it was just systemic, right? That you could use some technical solutions in terms of managing the processes of governance, right? But I now realize it's an adaptive challenge. So corruption is an adaptive challenge in Nigeria. It's not just systemic, it is cultural. This is who we are,
Yeah.
and we've accepted it as that. So to change that narrative means we have to have a deep understanding and a whole new theory of change around corruption. There's a reason why it persists. So the Nigerian system, yes, the malformed as it is, it's delivering exactly what it was designed to do. Exactly what it was designed to do with you on that. So
Now,
we have to think differently about it. So that's how I
yes,
got onto police sector reforms.
police sector reform very deep because in the first place, all over the world, the police, like in America, for instance, they say they are blue. So it seems like it's a clan of some sort, you know what? No, I don't want to
Yeah,
call it.
yeah, it was the club, yes.
Yeah. So obviously in Nigeria as well, you would have something similar in terms of how they operate, how they relate with themselves, and type of structures that they have in place. We have seen that if it's a case of it's the truth or not, but the Nigerian police are underpaid. That's one. Two, the Nigerian police are undertreated. The welfare of the Nigerian police is next to zero. We have looked at some of the barracks that they live. So, like if you look at, I don't know if you live in Lagos, but you were in Newsweek and all that, so you're very conversant with the Keja. So you will understand the impact of what that police barracks opposite area command,
Yeah.
the impacts that it has on that vicinity.
Let me
There's a
let me tell you what my challenges are with the
yeah,
positioning. And I can give you a historical um, inflection point as to when the police changed, right? Okay, because I was there in that sense. Right? The 1983 coup, right,
okay, yeah,
was
1983, yeah,
when they had Sunday Adeosi as
Sunday says, yeah,
yes, and he was a very bright, forward-looking police officer leader who was going to modernize the police force, right? And he focused on the kinetics in terms of the force projection, equip the police force, train them, the mopo, and you had them kill and go, more personnel carriers, give them equipment to go and fight crime,
yeah,
right? The moment the coup happened, the military confiscated all that equipment. You know why? Because they did not want any opposition to rule to power. The Nigerian police at that time, we had continued on that trajectory, would have been a much more professionalized police force, right? Okay. And it was deliberately staffed by the military, deliberately, my own understanding of it. Right? So we're looking at, these are part of the history of Nigeria that we haven't fully understood among younger generation. It's not to say the military was entirely bad, right? But that thing started from then. It was deliberate by the military to impoverish and de-optimize the Nigerian police force. So it became a compounded trauma to the police itself and the policemen. They're incredible police officers, even so.
So you
Regarding
always
the
have.
issue of salary, right? That was one of the key things we did about 3 years ago. We managed to get a new salary package for the rank and file and the police. And that was a lot of work, a lot of back and forth, In government, the shortest distance between 2 points is never a straight line. And the only reason why that happened was because I was persistent, working with the police itself, the top brass of the police itself. I didn't even believe that it was going to be possible under the previous IG. They didn't believe it was possible, but I was dogged about it, came into all the meetings, right? First pushed my boss, the chief of staff, to make representations to Mr. President, and then worked with the Ministry of Finance, get budget. They said they didn't have the money. Even when Mr. President signed up, they couldn't find the money. But he was just persistent. So one of the sterling things that I am proud of is that we managed to get them their salary increments. There are lots of other things that we have planned and ready to go. But like I said, everything in Nigeria is politics. So while we're wading through the politics of it, right, there just seems to be a hold on comprehensive police sector reforms, right? Again, this is me understanding from the outside, from the inside out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done, right? But the biggest challenge is politics itself, specifically partisan politics. So that is where the problem is, and talk about democracy and all that. The democracy we have in Nigeria is representational democracy. The spoil for the goods and services are based on some arcane ethnic representation. What we need and what young people should be fighting for is participatory democracy. That they have, yes, and that is what needs to be organized. I always talk about young people, and I always talk about it within the context of the demographics of this Nigeria, of where we are now. Presently, it doesn't make sense. You have the geriatrics ruling the pediatrics. It doesn't make sense. If you look at the demographics of Nigeria, 52% of Nigerians were born within this framing of the Third Republic between 1999 and 2004. 52% of Nigerians.
52%, yeah.
Yes. 80% of Nigerians are under the age of 40. 85% of Nigerians are under the age of 45. Right? So by the time you start moving up, the median age is what? 17, 18?
Yeah.
The life expectancy for a Nigerian man is 50, I think it's 55 or so. 52? It's gone down. So, boy, I have you in my prayers, though. I'm praying and fasting for you.
Well, I'm just a couple of months, to that 52.
That's what I'm saying. I have you in my prayers. Yes. Some of us past ourselves by date.
The beauty of it is you still have people like yourself still alive, and you still have the interest in making that change happen. But how to make that change happen is also another major problem in of itself. Now, this police reform, for instance, is the fact that you have to deal with politicians. You also have to deal with the police themselves. Earlier we spoke about the mindset. Now, the average Nigerian does not trust a Nigerian police officer. Even the ones that are their friends.
Friends in parentheses.
So it's a very worrisome thing because, yes, all over the world, there are people, or there are communities where there's distrust between the police and the community. But in Nigeria, it just seems to be an exceptional situation whereby.
I'll tell you why it's not exceptional. And this is me in some defense of Nigerian police. It is naive for anybody to expect the police to leave, to operate outside the standards of society. It's just naive. The police itself is the reason why their role is important is because the general public, cities in Nigeria, right, has their respective first contact with government and officialdom with the police. That's the first projection of the power of government, right? Mm-hmm. And in the absence of any grand social contract or any grand social narrative, we're getting into very deep waters here about the reframing and the reforming of the Nigerian state itself. Lacking a social contract, right? You're familiar with the whole social contract thing. right? There's no way you can get the compliance and trust of citizens, right? Trusting the state. There's a massive trust deficit that is cultural. It's not just the police that citizens don't trust. They don't trust their governments, rightly so. They don't even trust themselves, even within family settings. So we're dealing with a major psychological challenge here, which is adaptive. So to single out the police and say, no, I refuse to take that argument. The police is a reflection of the larger Nigerian society. So there's no way you're going to try and reform the police without keeping an eye for the larger Nigerian society. What needs to be reformed is not the Nigerian police. It's the Nigerian polity. That's what needs to be reformed.
That's not the
If you can
problem of
solve that
Nigeria.
problem, sorry?
Nigerians are the problem of Nigeria.
Yes, yes.
That's what
There's
you
somebody
just
putting
said.
well. Yes, it is now. It said to reform Nigeria, right? Reform Nigerians.
100%.
Yeah,
I,
and
I,
in the absence of yes, it's carry on.
no, I would just, want to say something quickly that I've always said that, the Nigerian leadership is a reflection of the Nigerian people. That's
We get the leadership we deserve. I mean, the thing about it now is that the problems and challenges have been so compounded over the last 60 years, right? That there has to be a reset button. They have to go back to the drawing board. And it's not the responsibility of any administration, definitely not this administration itself, singularly, right? It's all the succeeding proceedings.
administration.
Yes. We did some work on a parallel track that I'd like to mention here. And hopefully we're going to get this started again. It's called Imagine Nigeria. So you should look, I think, Imagine Nigeria. Yeah, it was an in-depth look at Nigeria, scenario planning in terms of what would Nigeria look like in the next 10, 20 years. I think there were about 5 scenarios that came out of it. And the work itself is, seminal. We were part of the team that put the ideas together. It was then under the chairmanship of the previous president, Soyemi Osinbajo. That's a wonderful document. But the thing
Okay.
about it is that we put so much time and attention. It was supported by UNDP and a lot of intellectual, how would I put it, capital expended on it. But then, the uptake, we try to, and that's what happens. The moment one government leaves, there's really no continuity. And nobody's interested in this Dogon Churinchi, right? They forget
As
that
they call it.
ideas rule the world.
Call it Dogotoreji. That's
Yes.
always been the problem. The
Yeah,
lack of
ideas rule the world. So we're going to
consistency.
wallow in ignorance
Mhm.
until the system collapses under the weight of its own contradictions.
At that point, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're getting to a point where we have to reset Nigeria. That's that, but how? The question is who's going to bail the cat?
So
I
there
know
are quite
these
a few
problems are not
people.
new.
There are quite a
Sorry?
few people. There are quite a few people who have been trying to speak up, especially now I'm taking it back to journalism, more or less.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to freedom of information, making people understand what is actually happening within the polity, so that people can try to make an informed decision. Now, what are your thoughts when it comes to the relationship between press freedom and the police? Let's start from
Press freedom and the police, they are analogous in the sense that, again, what does press freedom entail? The first estate of the realm within the political framing of the 3 arms of government. There's a reason why they call the press the first estate of the realm, after executive, judiciary, and legislature. Right? Okay. But look at all of those, the preceding 3 institutions of state. What state are they really in? You know what I'm saying? So the issue of press freedom becomes moot, especially now that you have the internet. Everybody's a journalist, right? But press freedom separated apart from the freedoms of citizens. You cannot extricate press freedoms from the intrinsic rights of citizens.
Yeah.
What we're looking at now is an absence of a social contract between the Nigerian state and its constituent citizens. We've refused to bail that cat. So what happens is that with reference to the police, at the street level, you have what I describe as a micro social contracts. The police knows, everybody in the neighborhood knows this policeman is doing this, that, and the other, and you're negotiating, right? Even when you get to a checkpoint and the policeman greets you always, bros, I salute you,
I
alpha.
have so many memories of that.
Still that.
Because it still happened to me. It still happened to me 3 months ago.
Yeah,
And
so you look at the guy, you look at the man's income. The man is standing there, putting his life at risk, right? Under inclement weather. So the state is not really concerned. Cities are not concerned, right? But they're expecting to show up when armed robbers are rampaging through and shooting everything in sight. Why should he show up? People forget that policemen are, first of all, human beings, and they're Nigerians too. We're not ready. We're not ready for prime time. We're not ready for prime. That's my own honest opinion.
We have said, the same thing a few times in terms of not being ready for change. Position right now should be about how do we start the change?
Well, the thing about starting the change again is look at it as a technical challenge. It's not a technical challenge. How do you start the change? Remember that I said about my favorite quote about change, of Mr. Fuller, you can't change something by attacking the status quo. That's what we're doing. Invade against all the legislators have done this, that, and that. No, we have to come up with a new paradigm. That's why I recommended to you to go to the Imagine Nigeria project,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
It gives us a broad, this thing was done by Nigerians, non-Nigerians, Africanists, a lot of intellectual capital was into it. If anybody is interested in looking at Nigeria clinically and looking at the trends, that would be a useful place to start. But is anybody interested in it? Nobody's interested in that, right? We're only interested in the here and now. What's in Maslow's
hierarchy of needs?
Well, yeah, Maslow's thing is there. But even that itself, it doesn't fully capture our own reality. We have to come up with a new framing of a new sociology for Nigeria, right?
A distinct sociology for Nigeria.
Yeah, it's almost like a back to the drawing board moment. We have to refound Nigeria, even when it's in paper, even if it's just a thought experiment. So to answer your question, that's where you start.
Yeah, somebody said if you can't capture Nigeria, you can't capture Africa. I.e., if you cannot get Nigerians to move in a particular direction, you can't get Africans to move in a particular.
Yeah, but that's what Mandela famously said: Africa will not be respected until Nigeria is respected. And I'm paraphrasing him. You understand what I'm saying? We have everything, pound for pound, and I've been around quite a bit. The brightest and the most resourceful people I've ever met in my life are Nigerians. Some of the brightest people in the world are Nigerians. So the question now remains, okay, what is stopping you guys from getting your shit together? Sorry, I can't say shit together.
No, you
but what's stopping
I mean, this is a podcast, so it's not.
Okay, so what's stopping you guys from getting your shit together? Mindset.
Come back to the mindset again.
Well, that's it as far as I'm concerned. It's mindsets. We don't have leaders that are giving us an inclusive, sustainable vision. Because everything is going forward now, right? We're not just competing amongst ourselves, we're competing with the rest of the world. What is our comparative global advantage? None. I'm doing some work in the oil and gas sector, doing some research in it. It cost Nigeria $48 to produce 1 barrel of oil. You know how much it costs the Saudis to produce the same barrel of oil? $7. $7. Yes. So why does our own cost?
There's something trending about NNPC right now, the corrupt organization in the world and all of that. But I think if we go onto that topic, we'll be going into a rabbit hole. Unfortunately, Nigeria is a unique country. A lot of people still
No. That's the thing. It's a cop-out as far as I'm concerned. Sorry to interrupt you. What is unique about Nigeria? A challenge, I have said, is that Nigeria's sense of exceptionalism, right, does not tally with its manifest destiny, as Mandela would say, about what Nigeria and Africa can do, right? And the reason why Nigeria is the way it is that we think we're exceptional and that the laws of physics do not apply to us. So no,
Well,
that's why we think we're exceptional. As a matter of fact,
yes.
the framing, Nigeria is both complex, right? And I understand complexity. Systems are complex. Human beings
Mm-hmm.
are complex, right? Right? And complicated. We're complex and we're complicated. And the complication is idiosyncratic. It is us. A refusal to create a social contract, to have a legal, rational basis for organizing ourselves, right? For actually dealing with our problems head on, right? Is a complication. So by extension, Nigeria is both complex and complicated. So therefore, Nigeria is complexicated. That is what is unique about Nigeria. Complexication.
Into my lexicon. Complexification.
That's a neologism. That's Tunji speak.
Complexification.
That's
That's
one of my creations.
that's
Feel free to
absolutely
use this.
amazing. Mr. Lardner, I've had
Yes.
a glowing time talking to you today.
Oh, my pleasure.
So that I will not let you go.
Okay.
I will always, be reaching out, to Mr. Lardner to say, Mr. Lardner,
Anytime.
these are my thoughts, especially, when we look at what we have achieved so far in terms of the new media. We know
Yeah.
that there's a lot of opportunities that can still be created in Nigeria,
Yeah.
particularly,
Absolutely.
especially based on the demography. Not in terms of skit making or content making, but actually
Yes.
being able to transform the access to that technology and the demography, combining the two, and at least trying to develop a section of the economy into a service economy.
Absolutely.
But we will not be able to compete at the global stage.
Mhm.
You are a pioneer, you've done so much in those areas. And like I said, that was why I was a bit confused when you went from the broadcast ban to the Black Maria. So that was actually,
Black
so
Maretu.
that's why I was,
It's life,
like,
man.
what's going on there?
What's going on
Because
here?
probably should be the DG of information technology, NITT, or what they call it.
Oh, nicer.
Yes,
Not nicer.
not nicer.
The
NITDA, Technology Development Agency. You probably should be at the helm of that.
let me tell you a story about NITA, right? If you
Okay,
look at the
yeah,
foundational documents, right? I was one of the people that started NITA. I raised the first, was it, I think $500,000 from UNDP to start NITA. Around the time I was starting Wangonet,
yeah,
right? I sent a consultant from Lagos to Abuja. I was there for about 4 weeks. If you look at the original documents of NITA, you find Tunji Lardner there in New York. So I was one of the intellectual pioneers of NITA. As a matter of fact, it was a choice between starting Wangonet and working for the government. Like I told you, I've done some work for General Obasanjo,
yeah.
and they actually wanted me to be the pioneer DG of NITA,
Well, better, yeah.
right? But I started this whole technology hub for younger people. I didn't just want to abandon younger people. I had no experience of government, so I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. But if you want to do the research, I don't know if you Google NITA and Tunji Lardner, something might pop up. Just saying.
Most likely it would, because if
Yeah.
there's that relationship is definitely going to pop up. You have a very
Yeah.
long Google sheet, in terms of the search links that come out.
Oh, wow.
So, oh yes, quite a lot. So people like us, we have to take our time to go through it to be able to
Yeah.
to pick out the pieces, because like I said, very rich history and all that. And we'll still be looking at how people like yourself can still be consistently working on the mindsets of Nigerians who ask questions whenever we can. And if you're sitting down in your homes right now, or you're on the mobile phone, you're on the train, because Lagos has a tram now, or is it two? It's a blue line and the red line.
Yeah.
Or you're on at the airport, you're about to catch a flight and you're watching this. Realize that there are people who are still willing to contribute to the development of Nigeria, but you have to also play your part as a citizen,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
every citizen has a responsibility towards that country. You hold a passport called a Nigerian passport, so that means that
Yep.
there's a contract from source between yourself and Nigeria,
Yes.
like Mr. Lardner said. So if you're not playing your part and you're sitting down expecting things to dramatically change, that's not going to happen. Now, there's a side view of Mr. Lardner that we're looking at right now that looks like the Minister for Solid Minerals, really like it. So I don't know if they are related or not.
Yes, Jimmy is also a friend. Jenny Long is the truth. It's always right there, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't joke that each one has a story.
It's a film, yeah. So he actually looked like him just now. So I was a bit confused. Am I talking to Mr. Daly? I like him, but
My brother in journalism now, but you don't jackpot to governments now. Big man now, so
oh well, he's been in government for a while. So
for a while, that's true.
we are hoping that he will also be able to make some transformative changes when it comes to the solid minerals, because that's another area.
He already has. He already started.
Well, I won't let you speak for him. I'll look forward to speaking to him myself.
Okay, brilliant.
We won't turn you into a public spokesman. We won't turn you into a public spokesman here. Don't get you into trouble, because
I'm already in trouble anyway.
Nigerians
I'm already in trouble. I know.
Yeah,
I'm already in trouble.
they are very upset because of the economy and all that. So they're blaming everybody and everything.
They don't agree for anybody.
That era has passed. They started the year on the we don't agree for anybody, but now they realize
so what are we now?
They have to agree for petrol. They have to agree for petrol, because you can't, even if you decide to start a small business, you can't power the business because there's no.
Yes, it's not knock-on effect of that. There's not the economics of it is complex, but you have to realize that this thing has been like this for decades. Oh, yes. The very first time anybody shifted the price of petrol was under Obasanjo's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the compound effect has been really.
Wahala day.
Well, wahala day, but for young people in Nigeria, like Mr. Lardner said earlier, population, and then you have the internet.
The potential is just phenomenal. But I like to leave. I'd like to leave you guys with a quote. I like talking quotes these days. It's by a guy, Martinique, political scientist who was also a psychologist. The guy by name Frantz Fanon. Have you ever heard of Frantz Fanon?
No, I haven't.
Write it down and Google his works.
Yeah.
And he says, and I paraphrase, every generation shall rise out of relative obscurity to find its purpose and mission and to fulfill it, right? Yeah. Or to betray it. Mm-hmm. The key word is that you shall rise out of relative obscurity to find your mission, to either fulfill your mission or to betray it. So this whole business of, we didn't cause the problem, so there's somebody to come and solve it. This mentality young people have, it doesn't make sense. There's an article I wrote when I was still writing a column for The Guardian in Nigeria. It's called, what was the article now? Yes, The Age of Consequence. So if you Google The Age of Consequence, yeah. And then another one that you should read is called In Praise of Mediocrity, in which I was bemoaning the general lack of standards and the mediocrity of Nigeria. So I think I even, again, coined the new words that Nigeria is a mediocracy. Governments are mediocre or mediocre, but mediocre.
So I've got two today now. I've got two today. Complexication.
Yes, and mediocrity.
I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. So, Mr. Lardner, this, like I said earlier on, has been absolutely amazing. And for young people,
it's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Pick up your phone, like Mr. Lardner said. In all this chaos, there's an opportunity.
Absolutely. Watch out for the signal in the noise.
What's the chaos? There's order
within
it. And you can always make something happen. Always make something happen. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you all for taking the time to sit down and watch this all through. And we hope to see you on the next episode as well. And
thank you so much.
For all you know, you're going to see Mr. Lardner on this show again sometime.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
Have a great day.
I used to work with the police, so yes. Bros, you must drop something,
I was
It's
just
one you must
something.
shake body. You must shake
Sure you
body.
can hear. At every point now, everybody is dropping something though. So
You must watch that now.
as
It's been great.
my
Thank you so
boy is the one
much.
that should Roger.
I know why. You brought up what? You miss. I don't think you understand what's going on. But this has been wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm
Thank you so
profoundly
much, Mr.
grateful.
Lardner.
Thank you so much. And
I
well
am
done.
very
Keep up
grateful
the
for
good
taking
work.
your time. I will thank
Okay.
you very much for taking the time
All
to
right.
join us.
Bye bye.
Have a great
All right.
Bye for
Bye
now.
bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.